Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ear Hustling Podcast. It is a pleasure to see everybody. We've got almost a full house. It looks like we've got our young prodigy, Mr. Princeton. We've got the distinguished James Montgomery, and we've got we have the elegant but yet sassy Soleil. How's everybody doing?
I'm doing great. How about you? How's that weather over in Wayne County?
43 degrees. So it's not too bad. I understand that you folks had some snow issues going on last week. I'm
Not
glad to
me.
see that. Well, I mean, you're in Vegas. You're in Vegas, so I mean, what snow are you gonna have?
We get
Is
snow.
Do you get snow where you're ready? You just get snow on the mountains.
No, it comes into the valley
Oh, does it? And then probably melts
sometimes.
immediately. And then melts immediately.
Yeah, but long enough to cause people who don't know how to drive in snow problems.
No, everybody don't have Michigan driving skills, but we'll touch on that topic for another day. So Soleil, it's good that you're doing well. Princeton, you cool?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's been quite some time since we've had snow. I'd say you're a little behind.
Right.
I got you're like a couple bumps behind, but nice to know you're keeping it. I appreciate you asking about us, though.
Well,
We're good.
maybe that was the first time you guys got snow, but I don't know in your part of Georgia, but I know last week when we were going through our cold snap that there was a severe amount of snow, was a significant amount of snow that had occurred in Georgia.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair.
No, it's not. That's not fair at all. That wasn't last week. We've
Uh,
had we had 50 plus degree weather the last weekend this week in the 70s this week, but it was the middle of January that we had that snow, and it was like so. It's been a couple weeks.
Well, since we've talked, James, you
You said
weren't on
last week,
last.
so whether we talked yesterday or today, you said last week. Last week is last week. So, or you meant last week before we met. Got it. Okay, we'll go with that.
Did I tell you how much I missed you?
You're like God. You know the zero concept of time.
Did I tell you how much I missed you?
oh
No, you didn't.
gosh.
Well,
But it
good,
was
because
good.
I didn't want to lie because this I didn't miss.
I mean, you said last week, so I mean, last week to me is last week. Excuse me for taking you for a man of your word. What was I thinking?
Well, please don't. So there are a couple of, I guess you can say, round robin things that we want to talk about. One of the biggest things, Soleil, that you brought up was the trade a couple of days ago. Luka Doncic going to the Lakers, Anthony Davis going to the Mavericks. Man, that shook up a lot, a lot of teams around the NBA. You figure a guy like Luka, 25 years old, all NBA basically every year that he's played. If he can get traded, then I think that it, really shook a lot of folks up at their core. We'll start with you, Soleil. What is your opinion on that trade?
Well, first, I do want to say welcome to season 4, episode 4. Black history is American history.
Okay.
Eric, he's just so excited to talk NBA. He forgot to say what the title of the show is. It's all
I
good.
thought that
Love you.
I thought that Princeton would have been the one that would have checked me on that because he is Mr. Consistency.
It's all good. It's all good. So, um, yeah, I was shocked by it. I think everybody's shocked by it. I'm more shocked that they didn't get anything back. Like, and so it just makes me feel like there's an inside job. And there is a conspiracy theory that I heard. Now, nobody else has said it, and this person is not in the know or anything like that. But the new owner of the Mavericks is Miriam Adelson, and she's very popular. Not popular, but she's known here because she owns the Wynn. No, she owns the Venetian and Palazzo Hotel and Casino, and so the theory goes that uh, she wants to get gambling, or Texas is the largest state remaining that doesn't have legal gambling there, right? So she's trying to get gambling down there. And the conspiracy is that she's threatening the NBA to if they don't get gambling there, she's going to move the team to Las Vegas, right? And so the conspiracy is that, well, okay, we'll work to get gambling down there, but you have to give up Luka to the Lakers, who is like the star franchise, so to speak. And so, I mean, there's probably no legs behind it, but it kind of makes sense. And we're looking for a basketball team. And I would prefer to get a team already established rather than an expansion team. So it could make sense. But back to your question. Yeah, Dallas got Kobe in the deal. They didn't get nothing back, which is very suspicious. They didn't make any calls to anybody else, which is very suspicious. So bad deal. Lakers got lucky again. The league is helping them out again, helping LeBron out again. And it's another great player that LeBron gets to play with. And you just can't put him in a GOAT conversation when he's played with all the best players and still can't win. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. Princeton, I've got a question for you in regards to the trade. Do you think Luka being dealt to the Lakers may signify LeBron's getting ready to retire in the next year or two?
Who, me?
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I was directing it to Princeton.
Oh.
I think LeBron being 40 years old is a signal that he may retire in a year or two. But in all seriousness, I don't think this necessarily changes the timetable. I was already kind of under the impression that probably not this year, but most likely next year, if not the year after that, he retires. And I think the timetable stays about the same. So I don't think this changes too much as far as him retiring. He's already up there in age. So what he's doing already is kind of insane if you think about it.
Okay. James, I got a different question for you. Do you think the fact that Anthony Davis got traded, do you think that signifies that the Lakers didn't have confidence that after LeBron retires, that he was going to be able to lead them to a championship, or at least competitive for a championship?
I don't think anyone thought that he could. He's not on the floor enough. Street clothes, as Charles Barkley called him. So yeah, I don't think they had the faith that he was going to be able to lead them. I don't think they think Luka is going to be able to lead them. You know, his defense was completely trash last year and just his career, right? You know, but I don't think he's the answer. He could be part of the puzzle, a piece of the puzzle, but I don't think he's going to be the answer. But no, I don't think they thought AD was going to be the guy.
Okay. All right. Thank y'all. That's pretty much what I've got for that particular topic. And James, you said that you had some points since we were with you, some things that you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, well, before we get in the show, let's talk about the most recent trade. And I know this isn't a sports show, but Jimmy Butler, before we went on air, got traded to the Golden State Warriors. He signed a 2-year extension as well, or he's planning on signing a 2-year extension. So he's the newest Golden State.
Might be that too, though.
Yeah,
Might be, but that's a total different conversation. But he is the newest. I'm gonna say it again. Golden State Warriors. So I guess my question, I'm gonna go to the basketball enthusiast, Princeton. Do you think what does this do for Golden State this year?
This, unfortunately, as a Warriors fan, it does not move the needle enough. It does not move the needle enough, especially considering they had to give up Wiggins, considering not so much the Dennis Schroeder, but they got Jimmy Butler is very good. As we've seen, he's able to take teams that probably shouldn't have been to the finals. But I don't think that the Warriors where they are now, and plus with the offense that they run a unique style of offense, a very high motion offense that's set on a lot of screens and getting Steph open for threes. And it worked when you had fellow Splash brother and Klay Thompson in that motion offense. Jimmy Butler's play style, he doesn't do a lot of motion offense. So I don't know how they're Steve Kerr is a great coach. I'm sure he'll be able to incorporate Jimmy, and they'll be in the playoffs, I assume. But I don't think they're gonna make any noise if they do even make the playoffs. So I don't know. I don't even know if this needle is enough to really make them go crazy. So it'll be interesting. I'll give you that, and then it'd be a heck of a story. But I don't know. I'm not as much of a Jimmy believer as most.
Eric, are the Warriors done? You think they got another move in them before 3 p.m. deadline tomorrow?
What assets do they have? Andrew Wiggins was probably their best asset that was tradable. Draymond is an acquired taste. I mean, would he help most teams? Yeah. Do they want to deal with that extra drama? No. And the matter of fact, as I start speaking about it, you got Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler on the same team. Oh boy, you want to talk about a clash of like type egos? I think that in itself is going to wind up being problematic. So if they sign Jimmy Butler to a 2-year contract extension, I'm thinking that Draymond may be on his way out if he starts to act if he starts to act out like he normally do, because Jimmy Butler, I think, has got more tread on his tires than Draymond does. That's going to be interesting. Steve Kerr's got his hands full.
So, last question for you. Do you see any other blockbuster trades tomorrow, or you think we're pretty much done and just see some role players moved around?
Before I answer that, I would like to address the Golden State Miami trade. I'm here for the drama. So Draymond and Butler on the same team. Over under, they get into a fist fight less than 2 weeks. They're just going to butt heads. But any other moves? Kevin Durant's not playing right now. He's they're listing him out, and I think that's probably because they're trying to trade him. Golden State tried to trade for him, and he said he wasn't interested in going to Golden State. But I think Kevin Durant is the next big name that's going to drop. He's going to go somewhere, probably to Miami even. In terms of big splashes, that's probably the only one left. I would be surprised if Durant is still on Phoenix. And then the rest will be role players, backups, not no-name guys, but filler. I think that's the rest to come. The
Awesome.
NBA trade deadline usually hasn't been all that great. This year, there's been some big deals, but like the last few years, because I watch it, like when they do their trade specials or whatever, and it's like, oh, so-and-so just got traded for so-and-so. And it's like nobody. It's like the 8th man for the 9th man and a first-round pick 10 years from now. So I hope that all the big deals haven't happened now, like that there's still one more big deal tomorrow when I turn it on ESPN. But yeah, Durant's really the last one left.
Oh, so there's more teams involved in that trade than I knew. So the original report said one thing, and this is what's finalized with the Jimmy Butler deal. So Golden State gets Jimmy Butler, Miami gets Andrew Wiggins and PJ Tucker. Didn't he play there recently, PJ Tucker?
I
don't know if he played there recently, but I know he was on.
He got a chip with Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, okay. And they also get a 2025 first-round draft pick, top 10 protected from the Warriors. Detroit get Lindy Waters III, Josh Richardson. Utah gets Dennis Schroeder, and Toronto gets Kyle Anderson.
They put some everybody in that.
Yeah. So I've never seen a 5-team trade. I've never seen that. but we see one today. And there was another trade that I was unaware of. Sacramento receives Jonas him, and
Valanciunas.
Washington gets City
Valanciunas.
Sadasco and 2 second-round picks, 28 and 29. And OKC gets Daniel Theus and a 2031 second-round pick from New Orleans. So as I see him come through, I will let us know at some point, maybe at the end of the show. But 15 minutes in, how about we talk about Black history as American history?
I think we shall. So, if you guys don't mind, I would like to go ahead and highlight somebody if that's cool with y'all.
Let's do it.
All right. So, Black History Month, which I was alluding to, it's actually American history. And I don't think a better example could be made than that of one Dr. Charles Drew. Dr. Charles Drew was born in 1904 and he passed away in 1950. So he was just 45 years old. But within that short lifespan of his, he actually is the pioneer of blood storage, and he actually came up with the method of separating blood plasma from blood. What that did is, prior to him inventing the things that he invented, you could only store blood for a week. But because of his, great ingenuity, you could store blood for like 2 or 3 months back then. And even now, a lot of the methods that he used, we still use in separation of blood storage. He also was the one who figured out the fact that in general, most people's bloods are the same. So if I needed a blood transfusion, and let's just say Randy, who's a friend of the show, who's Caucasian, needed a blood transfusion, and as long as my blood was clean, and we had the same blood type, that I could actually use my blood for his blood transfusion. One of the many things I should say that he was the inventor of is the blood mobile. So back in 1939, he developed a process of being able to store blood. But unfortunately, he got so much flack in the United States that nobody would really even listen to him. He went to, I believe it was Howard. Yeah, he went to Howard University and HBCU school. And despite the fact that he was so gifted in his field, in the United States back during that time, not only could we not share our inventions and get credit for them, but they wouldn't even listen to us. He had to go to the UK in order for him to get like the blood banks organized. So he really helped out the British a lot, overseeing 15,000 blood transfusions during his time in the war. Another thing that he invented is the refrigeration system that allowed blood transport from long distances. It wasn't possible to do it no more than like 2 or 3 days at a time, even though the blood shelf had a life of like roughly a week. When you take heat and all of those other factors into consideration, if it wasn't refrigerated, the blood would be contaminated before it even reached its destination. So he invented the refrigeration system for blood transfusions, not blood transfusions, I'm sorry, blood transports as well. Um, One of the things that was just so disheartening to me when I was doing research on it is in 1941, he resigned as the assistant director of the Red Cross. And would anybody like to know why, or does anybody know why he resigned after he basically was the father, of this invention?
I don't know.
The United States military wanted to make a mandate that black blood and white blood be separated after he went through this entire process to prove that all of the blood was the same. Now, if they would have took that attitude um, during the beginning of the World War, there would have been a lot of dead people. There would have been a lot of dead people just because of ignorance and racism, that one of the greatest inventions of all time damn near didn't see the day of light because of ignorance. That's why a little bit later on, I'd like to talk about the DE&I initiative, because I think that this is a perfect example of why we need that, even though it wasn't in effect back then. It's just a shame that if it wasn't for somebody else having the confidence in his abilities, that who knows how long it would have been before we wind up discovering the things that we did about blood, the safe transport of it, the different blood types that we have. It doesn't get much more universal than blood. If we all are from the same blood, then why are we why are we at each other like this? And I don't want to get into a tangent off topic, but to me, it's very, very upsetting that something as significant as being able to transport blood safely and figuring out how blood works and plasma and all of that other stuff. If a great man was rejected from all of these other major universities, and after he wind up, let me take a step back. After he wind up graduating from Howard, um, he wind up getting accepted into Columbia University, and he is the first Black doctorate from that university. But it to me, it's just upsetting that with all of the contributions that we make in society, that we get very little, if any, credit for actually contributing to America. But I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna stop on my tangent because I know that all of you guys have, questions and things that you want to present. But that's my little rant for the time being. Does anybody got any questions for me?
So I have a follow up to that. That it's always interesting to me as far as because that was my first time. I'd heard the name, but I think my first time really hearing, I guess, all the historical things with the blood and learning about all those things that had taken place. So it's always interesting to me. I feel like that a lot of these historical Black figures that I learn about, it always happens during February, of course, Black History Month, which is the reason why. And so I have just a quick question before we dive deeper, because I have someone I'd like to highlight too. Before we dive deeper into that, my quick question is just, and it's something we've kind of talked about before, but why should it be set up how it is now, where we're only really the main time that we learn about these famous Black historians, historical figures, is just during February, is just during Black History Month? Should it only be during this month that we actually give a spotlight to these people and we learn more about them? It's great to have it. I'm glad we are. And I learn something new, it seems like, every year, as long as it's February, though. I'll just start with you, Soleil. What do you think about that?
Yeah, blame your dad. I mean, he's the leader.
Well, folks, that's the end of the show for tonight. Have a good day. Have a good night.
Yeah.
No. I mean, and I'm not serious about that. But on a serious note, like, we have to look at ourselves for not talking about it. I mean, I've heard of Charles Drew when I was in school, middle school, high school, whatever, but I haven't heard the name since then. And I'm almost 30 years old. So so no, we have to look at ourselves. We have to dig into our own history and find out those historical figures. The one thing Eric shared that I didn't know was how the government almost stopped his invention, and how that could have totally transformed the war. It's just on us to have to dig into our own history and share our own stories. That's something from the trans community, the overall trans community that we talk about all the time, is that we have to share our stories. We can't rely on people outside of the community to tell the stories effectively as they happen. And so African Americans need to tell the stories of African American heroes, so the younger people can learn, so people outside of the community can learn, and not rely on outsiders to do our job.
That's true.
But here's the thing about that. I was going to chime in real quick. So, like, you make a great point, and I agree with you. But then we get met with the opposition of, well, why does it have to be Black history? Why can't we talk about all history? And I have issue with that thinking, because if we don't want to lose sight of our history, of our ancestors, we have to tell those stories because we cannot rely on the majority, who at least we're told is the majority, to tell our story. You know, I don't have a problem talking about this, and I don't think he will either. You know, Patrick, he and I had conversations. As everyone knows, he said on here that he was a former educator. When we started talking about race, I asked him, had he ever heard of Emmett Till? And he had not heard of Emmett Till. So he is a person that is an educator who we would look to if we just looked for our education system to teach about Black history. He doesn't know about Black history. That's no fault of his. It's not. But Emmett Till, that's like one of the most iconic names in Black history, in my opinion. One of, you know, so we do have to take ownership ourselves, and we do have to teach our children, and we do have to make sure that our history is truly a part of American history. And last thing I'll say, to Princeton's point, not just in the month of February.
Hey James, real quick, and this is not to be funny because I don't know. You had the conversation, I didn't. But was American history or Black history a part of his curriculum? He's in Florida. Like, is that like, for me, growing up in Detroit, that was part of the curriculum. So, you know, I learned it, but I don't know if that's something was on the curriculum in Florida. So I don't know.
He was actually an educator in Georgia, and I don't know if it was, but I feel safe in saying that it wasn't. Princeton, I'm going to yield to you on this, and we've had this conversation before. How much Black history you started going to school in Georgia in 5th grade, right?
Yes.
So 5th grade through high school, how much Black history did you study in the state of Georgia?
Man, I'm trying to think back now. Actually, the person I was going to spotlight is someone actually I learned about in school. I would say we definitely, once again, kind of going back to the comment that I made, at least in the month of February, from my knowledge, I would recall every year we'd at least go over someone. It was taught. I'm not going to sit here and say it wasn't taught at all. Was it a focal point? No, I don't recall it being a focal point. And usually it's just, you know, the generic, I won't say generic, that's a bad wording, but it's just the more famous historical Black figures that you normally learn about. Your MLKs, your Malcolm X's, just the people that you'd have a hard time growing old and not knowing about. But I won't say it wasn't taught at all. So it was definitely, from what I remember, it was in the curriculum. Just I don't know how much.
February.
I don't know how much. Yeah, I don't know how much it was taught outside of February, from my recollection. So, yeah, that's. I mean, and this is another touchy subject right here, but with how things are going, who knows if we're going to even have February for much longer, and maybe it's crazy because even if something extreme were to happen like that, maybe, you know how you have to turn things into a positive, or at least I try to turn things into a positive. Maybe that would be a step towards getting it to where it's taught throughout the year and not just in the month of February. So, but moving on, as far as spotlighting, like I said, the next person that I wanted to spotlight briefly, won't be long with this, is actually someone that I learned about in 5th grade. I remember when I first moved to Georgia, actually, I did a little a scholastic on this person. I remember being recorded, and it actually was shown in our school. And this person was George Washington Carver. I remember we were given a list, it was during February, of Black names, and we had to choose them, and we had to learn about this person and, you know, do a report on them. And I remember I chose George Washington Carver because I saw George Washington, and that was about the only name that at the time I recognized. And I was like, yes, George Washington. I'm going to do that person. And then that's when I realized that, yes, George Washington for Black History Month is not George Washington that I was originally thinking of when I was 10 years old. So, with that being said, George Washington Carver, though, he was a great figure as well. It was funny once I did more research and learned about him. It was what he was known for was they called him the father of peanuts, if you will. But he was born into slavery, late 1800s, and what kind of his rise to fame outside of the peanuts was how he actually had helped farmers during this time. This was around the Great Depression era. The fields were just not producing crops at a high rate, and they just could not understand why. And it's because they kept producing the same thing in the same area, and it was just destroying the ground pretty much. I don't know if any of you are farmers, but if you don't rotate your crops, that's what'll happen. And so he was one of the first people to pretty much say, hey, if we produce some high nitrogen density helping crops like peanuts and soybeans, things along those nature, it can actually really help with your other crops like cotton, which of course, that's what they were wanting to produce. And so he was a huge proprietor of that, and he basically pioneered the comeback, and people realized with his techniques, crops were back on the rise. Cotton was producing at a high yield again. But once they did it, they needed something to do with all the peanuts that they had now, because they had such a high amount of them. And he introduced several different foods, flours, different ways that you could use peanuts. And that's why he was known as kind of the father of peanuts. But it was very interesting, and someone that I hadn't known about until I did that report. And I only did it because of the name. So I always thought that was interesting. So that's my personal spotlight. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me about them. I'll try and answer them to the best of my ability. But if not, you guys can feel free to hit on whoever you guys have.
Just one quick question, Princeton. And I don't know if this is true or not. I don't know if you know, but I think that George Washington Carver was one of the first Black millionaires, I think.
I cannot confirm that one either. I can look it up and get back to you. But I do know he was definitely one of the original entrepreneurs, and that he did go on to venture out into a lot more avenues, of course, than just crops and just peanuts. So I would not be surprised by that. But at the same time, I don't would also kind of be surprised if in the early 1900s a Black man, no matter how influential, was becoming a millionaire. But I could be wrong.
Yeah,
I wonder why Planters or any other peanut company never tried to use his image or trademark his likeness to promote their product.
I think the name, it's probably because of the name. When you think of, if they were to use George Washington, I think most people would jump to thinking of the other George Washington first. That's the only thing I could think of.
Yeah.
So, unfortunate.
I will go. Yeah, I'll go next. So, as the only queer person that I know of on this show, on this panel, I want to highlight some African American queer people, specifically transgender people. The first one, Angelica Ross. She's an actress, but she was on the show Pose, which I highly suggest you check it out. It's a few years old. It lasted 3 seasons. I think it was on FX. And it was a show that chronicled life in 1980s, 1990s transgender people in the drag ballroom culture. It hits on some very heavy topics that affects my community. Great show. but she was on that show. But she's also the founder of Trans Tech Social, which is a organization that empowers marginalized communities through digital education and economic development. I'm grateful that about 3 years ago, I actually presented at one of the summits, and it was an awesome experience to share my expertise to a room of trans people, non-binary people, allies, who is just looking to get ahead in the tech industry. There's not a lot of us in tech, so what she's doing is an amazing work, trying to give trans people the education and the tools and the skills so they could break into the tech field. And then I have a couple more. Isis King. She's best known for being on America's Next Top Model, season 11, season 17. She was the first trans woman to compete on the modeling reality show. And she became the first openly trans model for American Apparel Company. Miss Major, if anybody is familiar with activism within the LGBT community, Miss Major is like on the Mount Rushmore of that. She's a trans activist, community leader, internationally recognized human rights activist. Her advocacy and activism has lasted for 40 years, 40 plus years. And then lastly, you can't talk about the LGBT community without talking about Marsha P. Johnson. Legend has it, she's the reason why there is Pride, there is a gay liberation movement. So if you don't know what Stonewall is a bar. Now it's a museum, but it was a bar in New York in the 60s. And that's where the LGBT people would gather. They would drink, they would dance, they would have a good time. And the police would come and abuse us, extort us for money, things like that. And legend has it that Martha, who's a trans woman, threw a brick that sort of started this riot that happened. And because of that, over the next few days, there was fighting, rioting from the LGBT community at that time towards the police officers. 1 year after that, we get the first Pride Parade, first official, it wasn't called the Pride Parade, but first gay and lesbian liberation parade. So for the community, like, we owe what we have today, although it's shrinking in terms of our rights, we owe to a trans woman. There was a movie a few years ago called Stonewall that sort of chronicled that whole thing. And this is the importance of telling our stories, because in the movie it had a white man throw the brick, and that's not the case. She always denied throwing the brick, but many reliable sources who was there said that she threw it. My trans mother, who lives here in Las Vegas, she's 80 years old. She was there, and she owes everything to Marsha and seconds that she threw the brick. So I just wanted to show a little love to my trans community, because we've been feeling some things lately. I've been feeling some things lately. And I just know that information, sharing our stories is important. So for the listeners out there, now you know some things about some very important trans figures in American history. Any questions, class?
Yeah, it's more of a statement. I was looking at Miss Johnson's birthday. She was born in 1945. The amount of probably ridicule that she experienced, growing up, being black, being trans. There's a lot of shit she had to go through. And I
Mhm.
noticed that she had, died in 1992, just as the movement really started to gain some steam. Unfortunately, she wasn't around to see how things have progressed, but just imagine being black and being, transgender or gay or, whatever she was. That was a lot of shit to go through. And during
Yeah.
that time there wasn't any initiatives, I mean, so you're young enough to remember like all of the things that you could say to people in school and it not be taken offense to, the N word for a long time, the F word for a long time. I just can't imagine, the strength that somebody had in order to stand up for themselves despite multitudes of people, pushing her down. So that was incredible, the time that she was going through, that she made that type of headway.
Hmm.
I have a quick question. I can't recall the last name that you said. The ISIS woman. What was her last name?
Isis King.
King. She was the model, correct?
Yes.
I don't know if you know this, but I just wanted to know, was I guess, as far as like, I wonder how she broke into the industry, because I feel like and I would imagine that's an industry that would get a lot of pushback actually.
Hmm.
For, you said she was the first trans woman to be in the modeling industry. I would have think that would have been a lot of pushback. So I wonder who like was the first one to get behind her and support that, and to make it more common. I don't know how common it is now, but I just know, especially in the fashion industry and the modeling industry, I feel like that's a real close knit circle, and that I imagine it would have been extremely hard, especially for someone of color and in the trans community, to break into that. So
Yeah, I don't know if she was the first to appear on the show, and she was the first to get an apparel deal with American Apparel. That's not to say she was the first overall. So I mentioned the show Pose
oh,
earlier today. There's a couple episodes that sort of touch on that. So some trans women, you will not know they are trans just by looking at them. You will not know. I have plenty of girlfriends. I know I joke that I'm a linebacker in a skirt, but I have friends who are look completely passable, right? And so there's an episode or a few episodes where one of the girls get into the modeling industry, and she's completely passable. And so a lot of times, um, trans people may have to hide it and not talk about it, to get jobs, to keep jobs, to make it go far. And not to, well, I guess I am going to be a spoiler, but they obviously find out that she's trans, in the show. So ISIS probably wasn't the first, and especially during the 80s and early 90s. I'm pretty sure there were probably plenty of trans models that just didn't say anything.
that makes sense.
Yeah, but looking at her picture, I wouldn't have thought she was trans, to be totally honest with you. Pretty girl.
Yay! See, you could say a trans woman is pretty in that film.
Yeah, I mean, pretty is, I don't know if it's subjective, but I mean, if you were to look at Isis' picture and you were just like, oh, that's a pretty girl. I mean, I wouldn't have thought she was trans.
Cool.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for
On
that,
to you,
Slay.
James.
All right. So I'm just going to rapid fire a few things here. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm going
sir.
to rapid fire a couple things here. Anyone recognize the name Esther Jones? Just yes or no?
Yes.
No.
All right. Okay. Well, Esther Jones was a Harlem-based jazz singer, and she has an animated character based off of her, and that's Betty Boop. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Um, December 1st, 1955. That date may or may not sound familiar. That is a date that Rosa Parks did not give up her seat on the bus. Well, what you may or may not know, there's someone named Claudette Colvin. She's 15 years old. On March the 2nd, 9 months before Rosa Parks, she did the exact same thing. Her story didn't become extremely famous because the NAACP did not want to exploit her, given her age. But later on, she did an interview at Newsweek. She says she felt like Sojourner Truth had her hand on one shoulder and Rosa Parks had her hand on the other shoulder and told her to sit her butt in that chair. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Once again, something that we don't really know about. I never heard of Claudette Colvin. How about Matthew Robinson? Does that name ring a bell to anyone?
No.
Has a nickname Matt. That is the older brother of Jackie Robinson. I've heard of Jackie Robinson. I do not know he had an older brother named Matthew Mac Robinson. Well, Matthew Mac Robinson broke the Olympic record in 1936 in the 200-meter dash. His name wasn't really recognized. Why? Because he finished second to Jesse Owens.
Wow.
Shirley Chisholm.
Yep.
Politician, we heard of her. She was running for president in 1972. During her presidential campaign, there was 3 assassination attempts on her life. In 1850, so right around the time Eric was born, Lucy Stanton was the first Black woman in the U.S. to earn a 4-year college degree.
What year was that?
1850.
1850. Wow.
And the last thing, as you all know, my parents were interracial. As you know, my parents were married. You may or may not know. They were married for 25 years before my father passed away in 2000. In what year do you guys think was the last state in the United States of America that legalized interracial marriages?
Was it Alabama or Mississippi? And I was thinking the late 60s, maybe 69 or 1970.
Okay, 69, 70.
I would say, well, the Loving decision was in the 60s, right? So I would say the last state to actually enforce it would probably be. You're asking this for a reason, so let me be extreme and say early 90s. 1992 was the last state.
Okay. And what state do you think that was, Soleil?
Yeah, Alabama.
Okay. Prince?
I know how laws can be and how there's still a lot of weird laws in place today that can just go years and years without, maybe they're not enforced, but they're actually still in place before they're changed. So I'm actually going to say, I'm going to say something crazy like 2015. Or it could still be in place. Who knows? But I'll say something crazy like 2015. And honestly, I was thinking Alabama or Mississippi, but I'll go ahead and say like I don't know, North Dakota or South Dakota or something like that. There's one of those places in the middle of the country nobody really remembers, and so maybe they forgot they even had it in place.
All right. So the state is Alabama. We can drive out of our front door and drive 19 miles and get into the state that just legalized interracial marriages in 2000. My parents, the day that my father passed away, my parents would have been breaking the law in 2000. So I thought that was really interesting.
Is that something they enforce? Or
I'm
it's just
pretty sure they didn't. Like Princeton said, there's a lot of laws that are on the books that's not enforced. For example, here in Georgia, there's a city called Kennesaw. They still have a law on the books that says every homeowner is required to own a gun. Do they enforce it? Of course not, but it's still on the books.
Okay.
Yeah. But just for it to even be on the books in 2000.
2000, wow.
No one thought that that's something that we should change, ever.
Maybe that's why you need to run for mayor of Kennesaw.
Yeah, probably not. All right, we got 10 minutes. What else we got, y'all?
I want to say something real quick. Congratulations to Beyonce for being the 4th African American female to win Best Album. She joins Natalie Cole, Whitney Houston, and I was surprised at this one, Lauryn Hill.
Was
You
it
were
best
surprised?
Well, no, I love Lauryn Hill, but I was surprised that she won a Grammy for the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill.
She won everything that year.
She did, but I mean, just for the simple fact that if you think about the Diana Rosses, the Aretha Franklins, you think about all of the great, female singers, and Lauryn Hill's there. No discredit to Lauryn Hill, because that was a badass album, one of my favorites. But I was just surprised that Lauryn Hill was in the same breath as Whitney Houston and Natalie Cole.
Yeah, I was going to highlight that, but then yesterday I decided I needed to go in a LGBT angle, so I didn't go that way. But
okay,
yeah, we're thinking alike here.
And Kendrick Lamar, congratulations to him. I think he swept all of the categories that he was nominated for. Congratulations to Kendrick Lamar. I know that it's going to be probably a big deal if he does it. I do hope that he performs They Not Like Us. If anybody saw the Grammys when everybody was like A minor, it was funny, especially watching Kevin Costner. That's what got me.
I didn't see that. I might have to YouTube that.
Well, because Beyonce won for in Best Country Album, whatever. Mm-hmm. I heard next year the Hip Hop Award is going to go to George Strait. That's what the rumor is on Facebook.
Hey, if George Strait can produce an album, yeah, he should get all his flowers. I don't see George Strait doing. I don't know.
Balance.
But
Eric, I don't know if you have enough time, but you want to say something about DEI.
Yeah, I did, and one of the amazing things about like DE&I is that everybody thinks that this is some sort of big thing against Black people, taking their rights away from Black people, which it is. But I'm just curious though. There are plenty of historically Black schools that are out there that has white people as the minority. So I'm wondering whether or not the DE&I inclusion is going to wind up expelling them because they're receiving financial aid from the government. I'm just curious on how that's going to wind up playing out for those folks. Does anybody even?
Well, I know that not. I don't know if that's me or probably is me. I don't know. Getting a lot of feedback, but I know that, and I don't know the exact percentages, but I know that in some areas, some fields, like DEI has helped more Caucasian people reach certain like leadership levels or attain more positions. So I think just the rhetoric behind DEI is just a Black thing, an African American thing, a minority thing. That's not true. It has helped white women, I think, more than anybody. That I saw a figure that suggested that, and whites across different industries. So to your question about the schooling, education wise, yeah, that would be a trip if those white students in those HBCUs get kicked out because of that. It's sad, but that's the world that we're experiencing now.
So in terms of hiring practices, and I want to make sure that I'm speaking from a position of facts, the exclusion of that, from what I understand, is that just saying that we're not taking, I guess, race into consideration anymore? Is it, and according to our president, he's saying that it's supposed to just be equal hiring across the board, not putting emphasis on a certain race or a certain gender. Does anybody really buy that?
I don't know how deep we want to go into the topic, just because it's a lot that we could get into, and we could probably do a whole nother show on just this. So I'll just quickly say on that the reason why DEI was even established in the first place was just from years, decades, centuries, if you will, of the hiring process being the opposite of not even being given a chance. So it's crazy to me that there's this new narrative that it made it so unfair in the other direction, and that people of incompetency were being hired because of the directive, and I think it was very much overblown, and that's what I'll just leave it there for sake of time. But I don't believe that. I believe the reason it was established was just because of centuries and decades of abuse of the system, and that there were still competent people being hired from it.
I just want to say one really super quick thing. I love how people, I won't say what people who feel that black people or minorities are incompetent, but yet and still, if you watch any old slavery music movie, black people are singing songs about how they're going to escape right in front of the white people, and they didn't understand what was going on. They were singing their plan, but we're the incompetent ones. I just want to leave that out there. They said it about black quarterbacks and all that good stuff too. So
Well,
anyway,
we'll definitely get into that because the unusual thing about this is that I did see the post that you read that we will curve this conversation for another show.
oh
Um,
yay!
you know what? So that's the second yay that I got today. I got one from
It is.
Soleil and
It
one
is.
from you.
Yep.
But
All
what
right.
I would like
This
to
day in
do,
history.
yep. So thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of lighten up the mood a little bit. This day in history, the Atlanta Falcons went against New England Patriots in the Super Bowl, and it was on this day that the New England Patriots made the biggest comeback in Super Bowl history. So I would just like to shout out to Tom Brady. You're doing a great job over there at Fox. But I don't think that we'll ever see another Super Bowl like that again, because as we know, the Super Bowl is coming up this upcoming Sunday, and let's see if Patrick Mahomes, can win a three-peat.
So real quick, who's winning? Just to answer, KC or Philly? I got KC.
I got Philly.
Casey.
I got KC.
All right, awesome. Princeton.
All right, what's up, y'all? Finish this out with some spitballing, as always. So this one, it's not too much about Black History Month, but it'll kind of touch on that too. But it has a lot to do with the trades that just went down in the NBA. And as far as something that Dennis Schroeder, I hope that's how you pronounce his last name, he made a comment that basically how the NBA is now. And I feel like you can make the case for the NFL too. In a way, it's modern day slavery. And what he means by that is, as you know, the teams have owners. And these owners, they pretty much have hooks. Sorry about that. I'm sure you guys didn't want to hear me sneezing. But these owners have a rights to all the players on their teams. And the players, when they come into the league and they're drafted, they are forced to be on the team that they're drafted to. They have no say in that whatsoever, especially for their first contract. And these teams can do whatever they want. If they feel like trading them in the middle of their contracts, they can do that. If they want to send them to wherever, if they don't want to play them, they can do that. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's exactly modern day slavery because they're getting paid millions of dollars. It's hard to put that one-to-one to slavery. But it is interesting to me. And I do think that we have to stop with this hate that we have for the players in these sports. I'll say especially the NBA. These sports, when they make a decision that's best for themselves, that's best for their families, and leave a team, no matter if they were drafted there, to do something that's going to better their career. I feel like we give these players too much hate. We're always like, oh, they can't be the best player ever. How is this going to affect their legacy? We always give them so much slack because they decided to do what's best for them and better their career, when these owners will do whatever they want to make business decisions. To them, this is a business. I don't even think they all care about winning. Probably very few of them do. They care about money, and you saw that with the Luka trade. They're going to do what's best for them. And so we need to stop giving these players so much slack and start recognizing that they too can do things that's best for them and their families, because the owners sure will. That's all I got. You're muted, sir.
Excellent.
Very well said. I couldn't say it better myself. But awesome show, everyone. You heard it from our mouths to your ears. Have a great night.